Hello and welcome to the channel. In today's tutorial, I will be showing you how to make a basic dress pattern. This is a beginner friendly tutorial, and if you would like to see how I made this pattern, please watch to the end of this video. I have two pieces of paper. I will be drafting the front and the back on two different papers. So for the back, I've added a zipper allowance of 1.5 inches. So from the line outward is 1.5 inches for the zipper allowance, and that line I've ruled, this vertical line I've ruled on the back paper is the center back, and I'll be placing the center front on this line, or the front paper on this line. And for the width of my paper, I have the biggest quarter of the biggest body circumference, which is the hip circumference, plus extra 1.5 inches for the hemming, for the sewing allowance. And for the length of the paper, I have the length of the dress, which is 40 inches, plus extra 1.5 inches for hemming. And the line I have above, I've ruled the horizontal line would act as the shoulder line and is my start line. So from that line, I'm going to take my vertical measurements. Half of my armhole opening is 9 inches, which I've noted, and the bust line is 10.5 inches. From the shoulder, I would measure 15.5 inches, which is the half length or the waistline, and then 24 inches, which is the hip line, and then the length of the dress. Okay, so I'm repeating this measurement so that I will have a straight line when I rule. I'm going to rule across these points. Okay, I'm going to rule across the points, the chest line, the bust line, the waistline, the hip line, and the length of the dress. And after the length of the dress, I'm going to add 1.5 inches allowance for hemming allowance. So I've labeled all this line, and as you can see, the bust line did not get into the back part, the back paper, because that's the bust line is not needed for the back part. Okay, for the shoulder slope, on the shoulder line, I'm going to measure 3 inches and 8 inches, and on the 8 inches point, I'll come down by 1 inch and connect it to the 3-inch point on the shoulder line. I'm taking this shoulder slope because the shoulder is not straight but slanted, so this is for the slanting on our shoulders. Then on the shoulder line, I'm going to impute half of the shoulder measurement, which is 8 inches, and I'm also imputing that 8 inches on the chest line, and I'll connect the point on the chest line to the shoulder slope as I've demonstrated. Then I'm going to impute quarter of the bust measurement on the chest line. I'm going to find the midpoint of this vertical line I have here. I'll note the midpoint, and then for the back armhole, I'm going to connect that midpoint I've noted to the measurement of the bust on the chest line like this. Okay, this is for the back armhole. For the front armhole, at that midpoint, I would come in by 1/2 inch and connect that 1/2 inch I came in by to the measurement of the bust on the chest line and to the shoulder slope as I'm demonstrating. Just watch what I'm doing. This is how you connect for the front armhole. On the waistline, I'm going to impute quarter of the waist measurement plus extra 1 inch for that. Then I'm going to connect this measurement on the waistline to the measurements on the chest line with a straight line like I'm demonstrating. Then on the hip line, I'm going to impute quarter of the hip measurements on the hip line. Then I'm going to use the cuff part of my pattern master to connect the measurement on the hip line to the measurement on the waistline. Then I'm going to bring down the measurements I have on the hip line on the hemline. The exact measurements I have, I'll bring that down to the hemline and connect with a straight line as I'm demonstrating. But if you want your dress tapered at the hem part, you can come inward from the measurement you have by 1/2 inch or 1 inch, depending on how tapered you want the dress to be. So I'm demonstrating that from that measurement I have on the hip line, which I brought down, I've come in by 1 inch and I'm connecting back to the hip line. You can see how I've connected it back. So if you want your dress tapered, you can go for this line, but I want mine the way it is, the measurements on the hip line to be the measurements on the hemline. So I would maintain my first line. Then for the darts, because I've added dart allowance to this pattern, I'm going to divide the bust span measurement, which is 8 by 2, and I'm going to impute 4 on the chest line, on the bust line, the waistline, and on the hip line for the front darts. I'm using the bust line, the waistline, and the hip line. I'm going to connect these points I've noted with a straight line. Then On the waistline, I'm going to take ½ inch on both sides of this line I just ruled. Then from the bust line, I'll come down by 1 inch and connect this dart I've taken on the waist to this 1 inch below the bust line. This is for the front pattern. Okay, this is the dart for the front pattern. And then from the hip line, I would go up by 3 inches. For the front dart, I'm going up by 3 inches. Just note that this is how you take the dart for the front part of your dress. Okay, then I'm going to connect the darts on the waist to these 3 inches I came up by. I want to have allowance on this pattern, so I'll go ahead and add my allowance, my sewing allowance of 1.5 inches on the chest line, the waistline, the hip line and the hem line, and I'm going to connect the same way I connected for the main body measurements. Okay, I'm connecting the same way, so you go ahead and add the allowance of your choice, 1 inch or 1.5 inches, whatever works for you. To eliminate zip bulge, at the zip allowance, I came inward by ½ inch and I'm going to connect it to the chest line and then towards the hip this way. And then to avoid shortage, okay, I'm going to replace this ½ inch at the waistline. After all my measurements, you can see how I've replaced it and I'm connecting it back to the chest line and towards the hip as I'm demonstrating. This is just for the back to avoid shortage when you remove that part for the zip bulge. For the neck width, I'm going to use a standard of 3 inches for both the front and the back for the neck width, and the neck depth of the back I'm using 1 inch. Okay, so the neck width of both the front and the back are the same. They're supposed to be the same. Then for the front neck depth, I'm using a standard neck depth of 3 inches and I'm going to use my French curve to make a curve for the front neckline. Then since I've added other allowances, sewing allowances, I'm going to go ahead and add shoulder joining allowance on the shoulder for joining the front part and the back part together while sewing. After this I'm done, I'm going to just cut out this pattern, but before I cut out, I'll make sure that my measurements are complete and correct. Check your measurements again to make sure you have the correct measurements and then go ahead and cut out. While cutting out, I'm going to just cut out the back armhole. Please don't cut the front as together with the back. So I just cut the back armhole, and then I'm going to remove the front pattern from the back pattern. I've separated them so that I can take the dart for the back. So I'm going to extend my chest line, my waistline and my hip line. Okay, I'm measuring them again to make them into straight line. I'm making them into lines. These measurements: chest line, the waistline and the hip line. So I'm going to impute half of the bust span measurement, which is the nipple to nipple measurement, on the chest line, the waistline and the hip line. This time around we are not using the bust line. Okay, it's the chest line, the waistline and the hip line, and I'm connecting these measurements. On the waistline, I'm going to take ½ inch on both sides. Then from the chest line, I came down by 1 inch and I'm connecting my dart to 1 inch below the chest line. And from the hip line for the back dart, I came up by 2 inches and I'm connecting to my dart on the waist. Please note the difference between the front and the back when taking your darts. Okay, I came up 2 inches from the hip line and I came down 1 inch from the chest line and I've connected. I'll go ahead and cut out these parts to eliminate zip bulge. So after removing this ½ inch, you notice that the zipper allowance is short by ½ inch. So I'm going to remeasure from this point inward 1.5 inches again and connect to the chest line this way and towards the hip this way. Okay, that has already been replaced when I was drafting. Okay, so this is it for the back part. Then for the front part, I'm going to bring my pattern and cut out that ½ inch I added. That's only for the back part. Remember, it's only for the back part. I'll go ahead and cut out the front armhole now that I've separated the front and the back. Okay, so this is it, guys, on how you can draft your pattern, your basic dress pattern. This is the front and the back. Okay, so I hope you were able to learn something from today's tutorial. Okay, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, like this video if you got value from watching it. The front will be cut on fold and the back will be cut 2 pieces. Okay, so guys, we've come to the end of this tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe if you're yet to subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a new video. And please like this video so that others can see this video as well. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.